Deputy Mayor, I'm very clear. When the Mayor is not present and the Deputy Mayor is present, the Deputy Mayor represents the city. Leaders of business, chambers from throughout the province, ladies and gentlemen, and members of the media and friends. I think this breakfast is quite timeless. It's not long after we had the engagement at the estuary on the south coast. It was a very intensive engagement. We emerged with a number of resolutions, and I'm sure we're going to be in time track the progress that we have had in implementing those resolutions. Before I make a few remarks, perhaps I should just respond to those questions sharply and then make some general remarks. Thank you, Johan. I'm sure the main reason you're asking that question is because you want me to make a commitment on your application for the air show. But let's say that's under progress, and I'm very sympathetic, as I've indicated that to you. Look, we are committed to all our regions. Newcastle is one of our key secondary cities. It has a history of strong industry. It's a major economic node in the north. Specifically, you would know that Newcastle is part of the center of the proposed SEZ for the clothing and textile industry. That application is with DTIC. They themselves have been very responsive, but you don't get declared as a special economic zone just because you write a letter. They're fairly thorough in the assessments, but all indications are that that application will be positively received. And your clothing and textile sector is fairly strong there, but it's not going to be solely Newcastle. We want a clothing and textile belt that comes down to Ladysmith and some of the Midland towns. Of course, I was there in December, if I recall correctly. I think you were present in that meeting. We made commitments of the engagement. I think the same principle applies throughout. We want to build strong social compacts in all our secondary cities, especially, in all our districts, but our secondary cities especially, because those social compacts are critical to addressing some of the key challenges that we have. I'll speak a little later about what work we've done at the KZN Economic Council, the economic recovery plan that we've developed, the 14 sectors that we've disaggregated our economy into, and Nigel is quite correct. We should celebrate the fact that we have a diverse economy in KZN, but we're clear that we're not going to have a spray and pray approach. We're going to have a targeted approach to each sector. So the commitment is there, Johan, and I'm sure we'll be meeting each other again very soon. Mr. Buthelezi, Zululand, the same principle applies with regard to Ulundi. Where's Mr. Buthelezi? One of the, as MECs and public office bearers, we often get these recognitions. And pride of place amongst my collection is a plaque from Ulundi municipality for the contribution to housing development in the area. So we're no strangers to Ulundi. We will continue with that particular engagement. In fact, as part of the broader Zululand area, I've received an invitation from the Zululand Observer to host an engagement with all businesses in the Zululand area. So I think, please be rest assured. If you go through our budgets, all the departments' budgets, you'll see that generally speaking, the budget spend will be disaggregated per district. And in each case, I think there's a fair, proportionate distribution of that budget. Certainly in my case, there's economic development, tourism, and environmental affairs, whether it's regard to tourism, whether it's regard to environmental matters, whether it's regard to Ezemvelos, and you've got a fair amount of Ezemvelo present in your district. All of it have a very, very fair budgetary allocation, and I think what we'll need to do is meet and take you through the nuts and bolts all of it. Palisa, I think the economic recovery plan becomes more important now than ever. I think we were developing a nice momentum. As I said, we've disaggregated into the 14 sectors. On the tourism sector, I think the tourism sector was the most devastated, decimated through COVID-19. But the word resilience that keeps coming up was demonstrated by this particular sector. We gave support. There was the 200 million rand allocation from the national department. We supplemented that with a further 20 million. And we held hands in a strong marketing campaign. And if you look at the figures for January, February, and March, they were pretty good. And we were heading for what we thought was going to be a bumper Easter weekend. That was not to be because of the floods. But we already started organizing. Last week we had the Africa Travel in Durban in this particular venue, 4,000 delegates over a 3-day period. I think all the hotels in the immediate Durban area had reasonable bookings. Next week, starting on the 15th, we have the United Nations Child Labor Conference that's likely to have up to 8,000 to 10,000 delegates over that particular period. That's the stuff, the nuts and bolts of building our tourism sector. Of course, recovery of the beaches becomes quite critical, and I'll say a little bit about that just now. So, on Monday, I was in Hammersdale with the Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry, Deputy Minister Gina, and I was there for the official opening of Kerry Foods. That's a 650 million rand investment. Kerry Foods is an international company, Irish company, employing 22,000 people worldwide. And their group CEO was there, as well as managers from different parts of their operations throughout the world. And they were upbeat about KZN. They were saying that the KZN operation will be their hub and their spokes will be in other parts of Africa. So they have this hub and spoke strategy to developing their businesses worldwide. Now, why would they have that confidence to say this hub will be here in KZN and their spokes will be in other parts of Africa? So we must ourselves internalize and appreciate our competitive strengths. When we say that Durban and KZN is the gateway to Africa and the world, this is a practical manifestation of that, taken together with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, although Nigel is also quite quick to warn me of other risks that may come from that as far as our competitiveness is concerned. Of course, you yourself have spoken about the coral brick. We can talk about SAPI, we can talk about Richards Bay Minerals, the 6.5 billion Zulti South expansion, and we have a long list of investments that are being realized at the moment. So let's not do ourselves down. That's not to gloss over the triple hits that we have suffered over the last 2 years. There's been a terrible pain and suffering waged by COVID-19, the unrest, and the floods. But it is because this pain was so deep and the danger so great that we must believe in ourselves. And the word resilience is coming up in every engagement that I have, whether it's with local or international investors. Now, just to give you a scale, because my observation is that when we deal with people, everyone quite naturally is consumed with what their particular experience has been. So, and they think they're the only ones who's doing anything. Now, we must recognize that particular effort, but also see what others are doing, and that the cumulative effect of that is what will get us through. So when you look at the scale of the damage, Okay, 435 lives, some still missing. The trauma and human aspect of that cannot be underestimated. 6,000 to 7,000 homes totally destroyed and another 6,000 to 7,000 partially damaged. That's a total of 13,000. The water, electricity, sanitation, roads, the scale of which we might only be exposed to the N3, N2, or the R102. But in every village or every township, there is manifestation of that particular damage. So the scale of it must be understood, and that we have a collective effort to systematically deal with it. So when you look at the first 2 days after the floods, and you probably had 60% of people with no access to water. And you now have a situation where 95% have access to water. So it's a systematic recovery from it. So when we characterize it as a response to disaster being firstly the emergency humanitarian response, then the stabilization response phase, and then you have the rebuild and recovery phase. So in the emergency response, we largely complete. Still some outstanding stuff. If you look at the shelters, some of them still have some issues. If you look at the stabilization phase, largely done, except for a couple areas. I've heard yesterday that the N2 South detour will be over and it will reopen completely on Sunday. If you look at the Durban port, which is a critical strategic area, I mean, that was an example of wonderful cooperation and world-class efficiency in the response. Because in the first 24 hours, the port was completely shut because of the road where 1,300 trucks a day go through, and simply because the port itself was flooded with the kind of debris that came down. And people speak about learning. I mean, it's the first time I learned that there's 52 canals that are bringing water in one way or the other into the port. And that's another major task for us, which, if you give me enough time, we'll be able to speak about. So there has been a significant recovery, which we must appreciate, and the balance is something we must complete as quickly as possible. So the recovery of that road, the rebuilding of that road to secure fuel supply, and the truth is there was a threat to fuel supply. And you had that one headline on the one day which said people were going to garages and not having fuel. There was that threat. But it was because there was a collective response in accordance with the highest standards between government, Transnet, the private sector, and the community, for that matter, because the community of Bluff had to be part of the equation to support their trucks going through a residential area. We were able to avert that particular threat. Of course, National Department of Public Enterprises was also part of that equation. Of course, the Premier would always mention the Umlazi Road, which took just a few days to reconstruct, having regard to the crisis that posed. So the recovery is ongoing in all the areas. I think the response, as far as relief is concerned, will follow the same pattern that it did with regard to the unrest. I always measure whether there's a problem or not as to the extent of the complaints that we get. And the truth is that with regard to the Sastria claims, for example, there was just two complaints that I had to deal with. And that was a massive round of claims. I think the report to the parliamentary committee this week was 25 billion rand. And those have largely been paid out or commitments made in a very systematic way. So the Sastria complaints, the Sastria insurance claims, I think, have been managed fairly well. The uninsured or underinsured were covered by two sets of funding. One was from DTIC, a total of about 2.4 billion rand, and a little bit from small business development, and then a little bit from provincial government entities, all of which were public processes, applications made, and fundings reaching the beneficiaries. What needs to happen is that we have to maximize the transparency around the availability of those funds, and we commit to do so with regard to the flood relief campaign program. We commit to do so. Desiree, the 1 billion rand commitment from national government, we actually hope there'll be much more than 1 billion rand. And the truth is that that has not quite been finalized in terms of the paperwork of that particular allocation. What we were authorized to do was to reprioritize and be able to release the existing funds that we have for other programs in order to get work going. And that has been happening. I want to conclude with just the point around environmental matters and the fact that climate change, I think the issue that everyone will now be an expert on is climate change. So obviously there's a number of legs to that particular question. First is the international leg, because we can't as a country on our own hope to single-handedly manage the climate change issue. So we will participate in the international fora and be part of the global response to it. But in that respect, there's some difficult arguments that we need to navigate as well. The coal issue, the issue of the just transition, I think is something that we as South Africans would be unfair to ourselves if we didn't pursue that just transition argument having regard to our Eskom and our coal reserves. The second is enforcement of our existing environmental legal framework, your EIAs and the like. And there's a significant body of law around environmental aspects. The third is where the work will really need to be done, and that is how do we ensure not just future, but we respond to this with climate resilient or climate change adaptation. And Nigel, I think one of the most severe manifestations of it is in the Durban South Basin. There's even the assertion now that very significant industry might be uninsurable because of what has happened. So that's something we need to respond to. And I can say that we've already engaged with the National Minister of Environmental Affairs. They have committed. We've already engaged with DTIC. They have committed. And there will have to be a national, provincial, and local government, because the eThekwini is a major player in this issue, joint response in terms of what new infrastructure you're going to need to be an effective climate change mitigation and intervention. But in that, we will need your help as well. And this comes back to the social compact. Now, we've got to go beyond the signing of commitments as far as the social compact is concerned. And when I go back to the economic recovery and reconstruction plan and the fact that we've broken our economy down into 14 sectors, then each of those sectors needs hard work. It needs work streams where every partner, social partner, commits very dedicated and skilled people, because that must come up with sharp and workable plans. So I would take this opportunity to invite organized business and the Durban Chamber in particular to think of who are the skilled people that you would like to contribute towards a team that looks at climate change adaptation and mitigation. I think I've taken more than my fair share of time. There's a couple of other issues that I would have liked to have responded to, but I won't. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, MEC. I appreciate your words and your comments and the responses to the questions. I think you're right. Next year when we come to this event, we'll all be talking about climate resilience and all be professionals in that. I'm mindful of the time, and I want to manage it accordingly. So I'm going to try and solicit maybe 1 or 2 questions, and then as quickly as possible invite the Premier to the stage so that he can address you. So I've got one hand at the back there and one over there, and if we can limit it to that. The gentleman there in the middle. Okay, you may. All right, thank you.
Hello. Good morning, Premier. There was just something that I wanted to follow up on with something that the MEC said, and the reallocation of funding. And are those being subjected to live audits? I know that they're only going to be announced, I think, later this month. And then regarding the social compact and trust within the province, Mr. Tembe said that, mentioned political infighting, and that this has obviously had an effect on business confidence in the province. And last month, eThekwini's corruption-accused former mayor, Zandile Gumede, was voted in again as chairman of the region. And although the step-aside policy, she said she has abided by it, she still sits in legislature. And you, of course, as the ANC chairperson, I just wanted to know, can you assure us that there is no influence behind the scenes that is taking place when it comes to Mrs. Gumede? Thank you.
Thank you. Take the gentleman in the back there, and then I'll come across the gentleman on that side. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. My name is Simon Maneli. I represent Safal Steel, one of the biggest steel providers in the country. We operate in 8 countries and have 12 operations there. The reason why I'm raising this is because we are also a member of the Hammersdale Cato Ridge Development Association, which might be very small to many, but we are a full member of the KZN Growth Coalition, and I've worked with the CEO in one of my previous lives. The worry that we have is that businesses are being bombarded by communities, or so-called people calling themselves community members, and demanding almost for us to implement the Black Economic Empowerment Act in full action, and they want to be part of every single decision that we make, which squeezes us into deeper corners, especially post the July issues that we've had. I personally have been shot with, or shot at, last month. We are trying our hardest best, and thank you very much to Andre and his team, who have acted swiftly when we had raised our issue last month. However, we do feel that we are, as business in that corridor, being squeezed unnecessarily, and we do support our communities, we do support forums of this nature, given that we are also a full member, yet we are not feeling government's arm in terms of protecting businesses in a corridor that we believe is fast growing and is contributing quite highly. We are a 45-member forum, which is a small one, which we are now feeding into the KZN Growth Coalition, but we're looking at going to about 75 to 120 businesses in that corridor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Finally, I'll take the question from the gentleman there.
Hi there, I'm Greg Courtney, citizen of this wonderful province. I'd just like to make one request, is that we focus on maintenance, because a stitch in time saves 9. And I think a lot of what keeps happening to us is that we don't focus on maintenance, and the same things keep happening. One little example, the Umgeni River, refuse and litter comes down that river, and the citizens and the eThekwini community keep cleaning it up. But it's a simple solution. Provide litter collection for the communities that are throwing it into the river, and then that's it. Once off, done. We don't have to keep doing things. So that is my request to the province. Please, can we focus on maintenance?
Thank you very much. So just to recap, maybe three themes that were raised. One, around political infighting. Secondly, the business forums, particularly in the Hammersdale region. And then thirdly, the infrastructure maintenance. So I'd now like to invite our Premier, Mr. Sihle Zikalala to please come up to the stage and address us and maybe weave some of the answers into those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Program Director, who's the President of Durban Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Nigel Ward, Co-Chair of the KZN Growth Coalition, Mr. Moses Tembe, MEC Pillay, from Economic Development, Tourism, Environmental Affairs, the Consular General of the United States of America, Miss Annie Lynn. Now, the Honorable Consular of Poland, but I don't know for what reason, when he was referred to as a Consular General of Poland, he had some rambling. I believe it is not because of the close proximity of Poland and Ukraine and Russia. That's on a lighter note. Andre Kipilia, who is also the coordinator of the Growth Coalition. The Deputy Mayor of eThekwini, Mr. Philani Mavundla, all mayors, but in particular the Mayor of Ulundi, Mayor Councillor Ntshangase, thanks for leading your team, the eight aside, and to be here with us today. Mayor Mtolo of Kokstad, our host from Investec, Ms. Taylor, we're grateful for your remarks and for continuous supporting us as KwaZulu-Natal. The group's senior executive of strategic trade for Aspen Pharmacy Group, Mr. Stavros Nicholas, the leaders of the Growth Coalition who have been with us for years, Mr. Reddy, but have since joined, and a number of others who are here, from Mondi, from Spa, from Tonga Tulet. We wish to extend our greetings to all of you. Members of various chambers who are here, Mr. Mshengu from Maritzburg Chamber of Commerce, together with CEO Melanie, the eThekwini Chamber of Commerce, the chair and the program director, Nigel Ward, is the president. All other chambers that are here, the Director General of the province, Dr. Nonhlanhla Mkhize, the Provincial Commissioner, Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi, CEOs of public entities, fellow compatriots, history has imposed on us a heavy obligation to chart light in the midst of darkness, to remain steadfast and provide hope at a time of severe despair and hopelessness. But withstand all of these disastrous setbacks that have befallen the province of KwaZulu-Natal, primarily due to unity and resilience of our communities. Unity is expressed by a common vision, and the common vision we have shared and we continue to share is that of building a prosperous province which is thriving in terms of social life, whether we talk of education and health, sports and talent, but a prosperous society underpinned by economic growth, distribution and job creation, finding expression through elimination of poverty and underdevelopment. This is the resilience we have shared. It is the resilience that have been epitomized by the like of Toyota, who, after having suffered from the 2-year economic restraint imposed by COVID, but suffered during the July unrest and suffered now from the disaster, they are able to still report to us that KwaZulu-Natal, Durban, and South Basin in particular remain our major factory, not in South Africa, but in Africa as a whole, and we are going to rebuild. That is the resilience that keeps us going on a daily basis. We gather here today in an engagement that marks the 15th year in which Investec has again sponsored the KwaZulu-Natal Top Executive Breakfast, which is implemented under the umbrella of the KZN Growth Coalition. We wish to express our greatest appreciation to Investec, and we certainly look forward to your continuation of this productive partnership as we approach the 20 years of working together. And as Mr. Tembe said, they deserve a big round hand of applause. As a public-private partnership initiative, the Growth Coalition provides a unique platform for senior business leaders in the province to interact with government and for government to tap directly into the well of wisdom and skills that prevail in the private sector. For this reason, the Growth Coalition remains one of the most critical bodies as we tackle the common challenges of our province, especially brought to the surface by the recent flooding disaster. Our partnership is in line with our recovery, rebuilding and economic reorientation program in line with objectives of the Growth Coalition, which are, firstly, to combine our long-term vision with concrete, practical, and collaborative actions to address the most pressing issues facing KwaZulu-Natal. The second is bring business and government together in honest and courageous discussion pertaining to pressing issues. The third and the last is to drive socio-economic transformation. A month ago, we had a strategic session on the south of our province, and we committed to work on a number of issues that were raised by the business. Over the past few days, we have seen the delivery of budget speeches by a number of members of the Executive Council, including the Office of the Premier, reporting on what we are doing as part of building the prosperous province but also on what we're doing to recover from COVID-19, the July unrest, and the recent floods. What we're facing as the province is unprecedented. While from March 2020, the whole country faced the consequences of the shutdown occasioned by COVID-19, you are all aware that we had to deal with the unrest, and now we have to deal with the floods. During the second week of April, as we survive the devastating floods caused by inclement weather, we all stood up with hope that the future will be better. Today, it's estimated that 445 people died because of floods. 48 are still missing. Not less than 7,639 people were affected, and 6,847 were left homeless. eThekwini has been the most and severe impacted, with an estimated economic impact of about 20 billion. A survey by the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition shows that at least 826 companies were affected, and the cost of damage stands at 6.4 billion. The majority of affected were in manufacturing, whether you talk of Toyota, South African breweries, and others. But others were in agriculture and forest. And we are also going to work with all companies that suffered during this disaster. The National Department of Public Works and the Department of Defense will soon finalize the construction of 18 bridges across the province, which we have said that they must be prioritized to ensure that we restore the services that have been disrupted by the floods. More of bridges and roads will be restored and connected within the next 3 months. SANRAL have agreed that in cases where they have suffered severe damage, they will construct bypass in those areas so that N2 will continue to work while they are fixing the affected lanes. And we believe that within the next 2 weeks, that will be done. As we stated during the State of the Province address, expanding water or expanding access to water and electricity is our key focal task during this time. We have adopted the master plan, the water master plan, but as we implement this water master plan, we get set back because the very same infrastructure was washed away. Nevertheless, working together with the municipality and the Department of Water and Sanitation, we are on plans to ensure that all water treatment plants that were washed away are restored. We are grateful of the partnership and the work that is done by Tonga Hulet to ensure that the water treatment plant that is next to Hulet in Tongat is refurbished and restored to work within the next few months. In the meantime, there is a plan to intervene and provide communities and business operations around the area with water, and to ensure that electricity and all other services are restored in the north. The Deputy Mayor has had engagement with the private sector and detailed the plan that we've put in place to ensure that the South Basin is also supported in terms of the restoration of water, electricity, and ensure that we don't just restore, but improve. And ensure in our improvement, we also address the issue of climate change. And therefore, we want to stand here saying, though we have been battered, but we are not broken. We need to work together to ensure that we go forward with our vision of building a prosperous KwaZulu-Natal. The Department of Economic Development, Tourism and Environmental Affairs will reprioritize 67.5 million toward supporting SMMEs and co-op through the relief, and that relief have already been approved by Treasury. The Department of Forest, Fishery and Environmental Affairs continue to work with provincial government focusing on cleaning the beaches and the removal of alien plants following from storms. In terms of the long-term, ETIA, the national government, working with the city of eThekwini, will develop strategies to prevent flooding in communities residing along riverbanks. So, this juncture, may I revert to the last question around Umgeni. And I think it's an issue we must deal with, maintenance of all areas, especially those that are along the rivers and our wetlands. And I think eThekwini will have to heed and follow the request on the maintenance around Umgeni River. Not that they need to be provided with all services, but they just need equipment. And therefore, we will support you and we will work to ensure that that is fulfilled. In addition, the Industrial Development Corporation, IDC, has a program called Flood Relief Fund, which will assist companies affected by flood through financial support. This comes in a form of the Flood Recovery Support Grant, the Infrastructure Fund, and this fund is a grant to business affected by floods for reconstruction of the infrastructure. And we have put this to 500 million and will be accessed based on evaluation of the damage. Then there is funding for expansion, where companies want to expand and they will be given some support to ensure that their expansion is supported and is growing. There is a program aimed at providing financial support to formal small enterprises affected by floods, and this will help to restore their small businesses that are operating in either industrial parks or in the special economic zones. The fund will support enterprises requiring funding toward working capital. Now, I know that the immediate question will be how to apply. As I said, it is under the Department of Economic Development, Industry and Competition, under the IDC, And therefore, all those who want more information will have to be in touch with the IDC. The floods are an indictment of how we have allowed our cities to develop without much consideration of environmental risk and geographic location of our cities. In the long term, we must adopt measures to take better care of our environment by building in ways that protect our settlements, but also protect our industrial parks. And I'm told that one example is to learn from how Dube Trade Port, when they were building the Dube Trade Port, they ensured that they take into cognizance climate change and the potential of climate change, including floods and all environmental challenges that comes with climate change. We therefore all are called to work together to ensure that we pay attention to the matter of climate change. And that's why as government we have also resuscitated the effort of ensuring that climate change provincial council is reactivated to look into the future of this country and our province in particular on issues of carbon emission and all issues that affect climate. We also have undertaken to address crime. And during the engagement we held early this year, we got the presentation, a detailed presentation from the Provincial Commissioner, Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi, and their commitment to work with business to address the issue of crime. We're working together and we will ensure that we deal with all areas that are affected. While I take note of what is reported around Keystone and Mpumalanga areas, we will follow on that and ensure that there is a coordination between yourselves and us as government, but more importantly, with police. But I'm equally inspired by the feedback we are getting from various communities, not only business community. Early today, when we arrived here, Mr. Graham O'Connor from SPA came and said he wants to thank and express his gratitude for the intervention and the work as well as the relationship that have been built with the SAPS under the leadership of Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi. And we want to thank you, Provincial Commissioner, for such work, and let us sustain that. We must reiterate that in all efforts to rebuild, we are not going to tolerate corruption. We have put in place measures to address and prevent corruption. We have said that the Treasury must pre-audit all contracts that will be issued toward restoration of services, and that is already happening. We are in touch, and the Office of the Auditor General is already engaging with various departments on auditing as we implement. And for the first time, Auditor General is engaging in an activity that is not post-effecto, but it's working parallel the implementation. We are also working with the Public Protector, the Human Rights Commission, to ensure that we deliver a corruption-free response on challenges we have suffered on challenges that have been caused by the floods. Based and inspired by the commitment to work together, we are happy that the President, His Excellency President Ramaphosa, has accepted the invitation we issued together with Durban Chamber of Commerce that we meet on Sunday to deal with all issues, and our preparation is to ensure that the Sunday engagement provide a platform and answer from each department on issues that you have raised with us. So going forward, we want to assure you of our support, but also of ensuring that the service we provide is taking into cognizance the future of the country based on the environmental challenges. Now, may I request to make remarks on questions that have been asked? Just few additions. When we closed the workshop we held in the south, I committed that we will go to Pietermaritzburg and meet with Umsunduze, the district council, and the Pietermaritzburg Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I'm sure that Mr. Mshengu, Melanie, and MEC Pillay can confirm that that meeting has taken place. And among others, we agreed in that meeting that the chamber will also have to second 2 engineers to work with the municipality on issues of electricity and other challenges facing Umsunduze as the city. We are going to be back. In fact, our schedule in terms of our plan was to come back to Pietermaritzburg at least 2 weeks ago. We couldn't do so because of floods, and I'm sure that before the end of May, we will be back to follow on all issues. I'm saying so because already from our side, we were planning to go back to Pietermaritzburg, and we were told by others that they could not finalize some of the issues because of floods. One thing that we want to get rid of in government is the explanation of failure, where people will come to explain that this didn't happen because of this and this and this. And that's why we've emphasized the introduction of what is called the theory of change, which means that while you implement, your implementation must be timeously monitored to ensure that you implement accordingly, but also timeously and within the expected budget. Now let me answer Desiree. I came here to deal with business issues. I don't know whether this is a business issue, but it is sneaked in. I would have preferred to deal with it as a political question, but nevertheless, let's deal with it. It's a question that has arisen, it needs to be engaged. So, when a person is charged, that person is, once you are charged, it doesn't mean that you have been found guilty. Now, in private sector, let's take private sector, what do they do? When a person is charged with internal or external, is either taking a leave, but not get expelled. So the same with the ANC, you step aside until your matter is finalized. Now, you say people are attending to the legislature. They are members of the legislature. They will have to participate in committees given the rules that are there. But I think there is a move. We must appreciate a step that goes forward, that we must all be decisive against corruption. And that is what the ruling party has implemented, which most parties, almost all of them in the country, are doing, with the exception of those who do not care of fighting corruption. I'm yet to see one party that expel a person because of allegations and charges before the person goes through judiciary. I'm yet to see that. I can count a number of incidents from various parties in KwaZulu-Natal, and some of those incidents happened even in the past 2 years, 2 or 3 years. Now, I wouldn't want to spoil this breakfast session with referring to names of individuals and parties. I think, Simon, I've commented on the issue of business forums, but I must further indicate that the challenge of business forums is because some of them are colluding with officials or public representatives. We must have a common vision and deal with these together. We're happy that police have taken steps to be decisive. Some of them have been arrested on site, and we want to encourage such decisiveness. For those who want to engage in business genuinely, we do have programs that seek to support them. We've put in place clear framework, clear plans, even within various sectors of the economy to support them. With regard to Newcastle, we are quite interested to see Newcastle reclaiming its glory. We are working together as the government, trying to resuscitate the steel industry in Newcastle. You will recall that the Newcastle economy was dependent on ISCO and later ArcelorMittal. We have been engaging with Transnet with a view of resuscitating Newcastle as a hub that will produce railways. That have been done for years, and we hope Minister Gordhan will fast-track this plan. But on top of that, we have earmarked Newcastle for light manufacturing industry. The air show, as you are inviting us today, we have been supporting that air show, and I remember we co-sponsored that air show in the budget of 2018-2019 through Economic Development Tourism KZN. Under the mayor, Dr. Ngubane, we supported the air show. It's quite a good event. It could be developed and become one of the major events in the province, like your July and others. We are also working to implement the clothing and textile special economic zone, building on the capacity that already exists in Newcastle. Some years ago, I met with some of them who are in fashion, and as well as clothing and textile. We met in Newcastle. But also what undermines the industry, the clothing and textile industry, is some business criminal activities that are in place. Lot of people who are foreign nationals, who are undocumented, living in appalling conditions. Whether you will go to Newcastle at the junction, or you will go to the factories at Section 7, that industrial park, some people are made to stay inside the factories and wake up and work there without, well, let me leave this story. It's very, very painful. Very painful. I've been there, and we may need to attend to it together. And I can safely say most of those factories that operate, they operate within the government industrial park, but what is happening, it's inhumane, and we need to be decisive in dealing with it. We started to ensure that all people who are working there are registered, they live in an environment that is healthy, unlike what is happening, and they are also offered decent salaries, at least at a level of minimum wage. So we have a commitment to work with Newcastle around revival of steel industry, growing light manufacturing, supporting tourism, and deal or expand on clothing and textile, though the SEZ itself will be in Ladysmith, but that whole band is dedicated for clothing and textile. We're grateful